This is a Squiz podcast. We're your shortcut to being informed. The Weekly Wrap is the week in news and what's coming up. I'm Kate Watson.
And I'm Claire Kimball.
This week, it's the charges that have been laid against Alan Jones that we'll talk about at the top, the latest on the Russia-Ukraine war, and also that methanol poisoning in Laos.
Yeah, and a bit of an update on Donald Trump's appointments as well. We're in the thick of Schoolies in what's coming up. So the final sitting week of Parliament there as well. That's for the year. It's going to be jam-packed. Yeah. We're going to begin today, though, by trying to explain Domingo.
If you know, you know.
Trying is the word.
Sometimes, Claire, there's a news story that's so bamboozling, I guess, discombobulating, but also inexplicably big that we can't ignore it. We have to talk about it. I quite like to ignore this one and just move on and pretend like I just naively move through it.
Yep.
But Domingo's everywhere at the moment.
And look, I watched Saturday Night Live, so I'd actually seen these clips in the show. But if you open up a social media app at the moment, you can't avoid it.
I think that's right. I mean, you don't really know because potentially we're just seeing it because we've clicked on one thing or you watched it and now you're just seeing it. And plenty of people listening might be like, I've not seen a thing. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But for those who have and want to understand, or for those who are really enjoying it and just want a bit more content on it, here we go. I said to you this morning, I'm getting to the rest of the news, but I'm just trying to understand Domingo. And you sent me a text, which I think sums it up pretty well. Isn't it just a couple of hot songs, a couple of hot performers, Ariana and Charlie, and a funny sketch equals TikTok magic?
And it's just that simple formula.
I think it is.
And that means that millions and millions of views of these videos. Look, essentially it is a sketch from Saturday Night Live.
So we are going to explain it more than that?
Just a little bit.
Okay.
A sketch from Saturday Night Live. And it does feature a couple of these big songs of the American summer. And then the performers that they had on Saturday Night Live are very much in the news at the moment. So It's part of that algorithm that's feeding the content of things that we want to know about.
I guess that's right. Saturday Night Live, if you don't know what Saturday Night Live is, I don't actually know if we can help you.
I don't know that we can go back that step.
No, we can't help you, but it's a really big show, of course. Yep. About a month ago, Ariana Grande was the host.
Yep.
She's also the star of Wicked. She's everywhere at the moment.
Everywhere.
She did a skit where she was a bridesmaid singing very much off-key. She's an amazing singer, but she was very much off-key for the bride.
Yep.
To the song Espresso, which is a huge hit.
Huge.
By Sabrina Carpenter. Again, I think if you don't know, we can't help you.
And this is the point where the younger members of our team go, oh, God, are you really
Are you explaining Espresso? But it's a huge song.
Huge song.
Yeah, if you don't, as I said, if you don't know it, just, you know, we're only going to talk about this for about a minute more. So we're nearly there. The bride had a fling in the skit with a guy called Domingo.
Clearly on their hens weekend somewhere else. Marcelo Fernandez is the actor who plays Domingo. And look, they basically rewrite the lyrics to Espresso and sort of unpack the adventure that this bride has had with Domingo at the wedding in front of the groom, who is completely undone by all of it. It's just a funny skit.
It's just a funny skit.
Yep.
Ariana Grande singing badly is quite amazing enough. It just went on, though. He appeared at Sabrina Carpenter's concert as the character Domingo, and that sort of fueled the fire a bit more. And then Saturday Night Live followed up with another skit that featured Domingo over the weekend to another really hot song called Really Hot Song, because it's called Hot to Go.
Yep.
And now it's just all over the internet, and that is pretty much it, I think.
It's pretty much it. Like, I reckon go and Google Domingo and it'll bring it all up for you. I reckon it's good for a laugh.
Well, I think you should revert to your earlier statement. A couple of hot songs, a couple of hot performers, and a funny sketch equals TikTok magic.
Done.
The internet.
Yeah, how that works. Who knows?
I think we'll put links to some of it in people's show notes.
Yeah, why not?
If you are just starting to enter this conversation.
Sure.
Done. Alan Jones's arrest was a very big news story this week.
Yeah, it sure was. So just to step it back a little bit, Alan Jones is 83 years old. He's been very much a public figure in Australia, really probably since the 80s when he started his career on radio. That career, of course, went for about 40 years, and he was really at the top of broadcasting in Australia, not just in Sydney, which was his local market. Before that, he was a teacher. He attempted to enter politics a number of times. Kate, I thought it was just the once, but you've informed me.
It was, definitely
quite a few tilts, which, there you go. He, of course, was the coach of the Australian rugby team as well, the Wallabies. Into radio very successfully. What Alan Jones has been charged with this week, though, is 26 offences of historical incidences of indecent assault and also sexual touching.
Yeah, 9 people have now come forward as we're recording this, a number that has grown across the week, which is why I give that caveat. The offences are alleged to have occurred between 2001 and 2019 mostly. This one came out of an investigation by Nine journalist Kate McClymont. It was her work that said Jones allegedly indecently assaulted, groped or inappropriately touched multiple young men, and then that initiated the police investigation into Alan Jones.
Yeah, and it's been interesting watching Kate this week, actually. She's done a number of interviews saying that her investigation, which spanned 6 decades, she was quite surprised that police were actually able to move on a range of those allegations from a 20-year period. She was quite encouraged that that had actually happened, given the investigation that she had done and the people who she had spoken to. So for Alan Jones's part, he's out on bail now. The arrest was very public, lots of pictures. It really dominated the news that day. He denies all of the allegations. It's been fascinating to see, though, who has lined up for Alan Jones and is starting to back away from Alan Jones because, of course, he's a guy who has moved in very powerful circles.
You can't sort of overstate that. Like, when it comes to power and influence in Australia, he has been in the middle of that for such a long time. Andrew Bolt actually said on his show on Sky News this week, and I thought this quote was sound, "This could be one of the greatest falls from grace we've seen in this country, and if so, we're going to be asking ourselves how people bent to power and ask who else knew about what Jones allegedly did."
Yeah, that's quite a moment because, of course, Andrew Bolt was moving in those circles very much with Alan Jones. So that was notable this week. James Packer, another very close person to Alan Jones, he said that he has the right to the presumption of innocence. Ray Hadley, though, who was his colleague from 2GB for many, many years, has previously said that his relationship with Jones had soured, so there wasn't a lot coming from him this week. He'd outlined that there was a 2GB employee that had told him that Jones had behaved inappropriately.
Yeah, then there's others like Peter Credlin, former Chief of Staff to Tony Abbott, former Prime Minister. She hosted a show on Sky News alongside Alan Jones. She said the charges laid against her longtime friend are entirely out of character with the man I've known. But the thing is, Claire, mostly people haven't said much.
Not a lot. I guess it's a case of let's see what the courts do and let the court do their thing.
Yeah.
On that, he's going to appear on the 18th of December.
Some other news stories from the week. A quick update before we get into global wars, I guess, Russia, Ukraine, and then we'll talk about what's happened with Benjamin Netanyahu this week. But Donald Trump's appointments was something we discussed at length in Weekly Wrap last week. We talked about Matt Gaetz. He was Trump's pick to become Attorney General. We mentioned that was controversial at the time, not to be now.
So if you listened really carefully last week and you clocked Matt Gaetz,
you would have had to listen. I think we only did like 2 sentences on it.
Dump that out of your brain. You probably don't need that anymore. But
Domingo in, Matt Gaetz out.
Exactly. It's a straight swap. But really, I guess he was Trump's pick to become the Attorney General. And what happened on Friday is that Gaetz withdrew himself for consideration because he said that he'd become too much of a distraction. That distraction was around a congressional inquiry that had been happening in the last term of government where claims that he was in a relationship with a 17-year-old girl, that he was using drugs, and all sorts of other accusations were under investigation. The debate was around whether that committee could release its findings, even though it hadn't wrapped up and even though it didn't have the jurisdiction to do so.
And you probably don't need to know all of that except that he's not going to do this anymore. But the thing for him is he was actually elected to the Congress, but he had to resign that position to take up the job as Attorney General if he was to do that. So now he doesn't have a job.
Yep. So he was announced by Trump. He quickly went to the Congress and said, I quit as congressman. He's now kind of left high and dry. Sucks for him. But there is still a question about whether he can actually take up that role as congressman for Florida, because what happens is the governor of that state would select his replacement. And given that hasn't actually happened and everything that has happened since then, that they might just put him back in.
And the people did vote him in, I guess.
Exactly.
So
and the governor's Republican as well.
On to Russia and Ukraine. Big news story this week. Ukraine used American and British long-range missiles for the first time to attack Russia.
Yeah, so just to step that back a bit, this war has been going on for almost 3 years, if you can believe it. And for all of that time, Volodymyr Zelensky has been asking his allies, so America and the UK, to allow him to use more of their weaponry, particularly the really powerful high-range missiles against Russia. That would include these that have been used this week. So it's quite a notable escalation in the war.
Yeah, and I mean, it feels weird to even say this, but the reluctancy came from the US and the UK because it would potentially be interpreted by Russia as a direct attack by the US and the UK. That could be tantamount to World War III.
There was a lot of conversation, remember, in the early days of the war about, like, why wouldn't the US just lend Ukraine
whatever they need,
fighter pilots, fighter planes, all of that kind of stuff. But that was the big question, essentially, that would it be seen as these powers really
so why change their
fighting
mind?
Each other? Seems like Joe Biden on the way out has gone, what the heck?
This is what I want to do.
This is what I want to do. What happened was, in response, Russia, as soon as that announcement was made, announced that it was going to lower the threshold for what it considered appropriate use of their nuclear weapons. So there was a lot of talk this week about that. And then as we got to the end of the week, Russia actually used a really experimental ballistic missile, which has really raised alarm around the world.
A hypersonic weapon, which means it can go very, very fast. It's said to be also very manoeuvrable, so it can change direction, which makes it hard to shoot down. It really is such a big development that Russia forewarned the US and Ukraine that it was going to have a go at using this.
Yeah, and look, it's a term that's been thrown around a lot, this escalation in the war, but this is really one of those moments in this conflict just to be aware of. It is a lot.
And we've got a new president coming in, so Trump is likely to have a different approach, but this certainly was a Joe Biden decision sort of on the way out. Turning now to the International Criminal Court, they issued an arrest warrant for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defence Minister Yoav Gallant. We've talked before about these arrest warrants being issued. In the case of Netanyahu and Gallant, it won't actually lead to an arrest, as Israel's not a member state of the ICC, so they don't recognise its jurisdiction. But if they travel overseas into a member state, Australia, for example, is a member state, that state could be forced to oblige.
Could be forced to oblige. And look, regardless, it's just not a club that you really want to be a part of. It puts Netanyahu in the same category as Omar Hassan al-Bashir, who is the deposed president of Sudan. He was accused of killing thousands and thousands of his people. Also Vladimir Putin, who's accused of committing war crimes during the Ukraine war.
Yeah, just on Netanyahu and Gallant, what they're accused of by the ICC is the war crime of starvation as a method of warfare and the crimes against humanity of murder, persecution and other inhumane acts. That's the wording. It wasn't just them who was targeted this week. Hamas military leader Mohammed Deif are also in the ICC's sights for alleged war crimes relating to the Gaza war. Israel says that person is dead, though nothing is confirmed.
No, Hamas hasn't confirmed that, like they have confirmed other leaders. So, yeah, it's just one to be aware of as well. For Israel, though, the thing to call out is that it's the first time that a leader of a democracy and a Western aligned state has been charged by the ICC.
Yeah, for his part, Netanyahu says Israel utterly rejects the false and absurd charges of the International Criminal Court. He says it's anti-Semitic. Moving on, the death of Melbourne teenager Bianca Jones after she consumed methanol-laced drinks during a backpacking holiday in Laos. Just an awful story.
It's just so sad. She died on Thursday in hospital in Thailand. As we record, there are 4 others who have died. They were tourists from the United States, from the UK and also from Denmark. Her best friend is Holly Bowles. She's still fighting for her life in Thailand. We should probably also talk about methanol for the moment. Because
it's sort of the first time I really understood how dangerous it was.
Yeah, and look, I've probably only been aware just from being in the back end of news websites all the time and looking at some of these things and news that comes out of places like Vietnam and Sri Lanka and India. There are these outbreaks of these poisonings from time to time.
Yeah, so the technical explanation is that as little as 10 mils of methanol can break down into formic acid. That's toxic for humans. If you ingest 30 mils, it can be fatal.
Yeah, and 30 mils, of course, just when you think about it, that's like a standard shot. So if you're drinking shots of vodka or drinking a cocktail, it doesn't actually take a lot of liquid for it to be toxic and for it to be potentially fatal.
Not to be confused with ethanol.
Not to be confused with ethanol. So, yes, methanol is a form of alcohol, so is ethanol. Ethanol is the alcohol that we drink in wine and beer and spirits. So what happens is you can't taste the difference, so that's an issue. It's also odourless, which alcohol is, so that's a problem. Methanol, though, is cheaper than ethanol. So when you look at backyard moonshine in countries that don't have the same sort of regulations that we do, methanol is often substituted for ethanol.
And that's not to say that the people doing this are necessarily thinking it's going to kill people. That's not the desired outcome, but they believe they can keep it at non-fatal levels. Sometimes, though, batches make it out into the world for sale that are toxic and that are poisonous. 13,000 suspected deaths from methanol poisoning since 1998 around the world.
Yeah, and almost 400 in the last 12 months, so mainly in countries like India, Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam, Cambodia, those sorts of countries.
Important to say, in the case of Bianca Jones and Holly Bowles, we really don't know what happened at this point. It's very hard to know where they got it, where they were drinking it, and for all of the others that are suffering, we don't really know what's gone on here.
They're still investigating, yeah.
But our Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, has reminded travellers to be very careful with what they drink whilst overseas.
Yeah, and if you're wondering what the actual government official advice is on this, it's that travellers should be very careful with drinks made from spirits, particularly, that you should avoid homemade drinks and you should only drink at very, very reputable venues.
Looking at the week ahead, not quite as action-packed as previous weeks you've got written down here. That's a big call. You know that like massive news is going to happen next week now.
No, and I don't mind that. I'm okay with that.
But it's always bad when it's massive. I'm going to say
it's not always bad.
Nearly always.
Okay, well, yes. But I'm knocking on wood. So when I say not quite as action-packed as previous weeks, it could be the calm before the storm of December and Christmas. Let's go with that.
Yeah, God, it really is nearly Christmas time. It's Schoolies time, though. That's probably something to shout out. So Queensland have been on Schoolies for the last week. It's New South Wales and Victoria's turn next week. There's a whole organised effort around Schoolies these days.
Oh, it's not like back in my day, Kate.
No, even my day.
I went to the Gold Coast for Schoolies.
Did you?
Caught the train from Albury.
Oh, how long did that take?
A really long time.
Did a whole bunch of you take the train?
Yeah,
or were you just sent on the train?
Just sent on the train on myself. No, big gang of us.
I think I've mentioned I went to Fiji before, but apparently Fiji is actually a Schoolies destination now.
It is. Yeah. I was looking on the official website. There's whole official events and a whole infrastructure around this. Looking at what the website said, so the official count is 11,000 Schoolies hit the Gold Coast this week. Lots of praise from them about the good behaviour of the crowd. Lots of conversation too about the younger generation these days. They're not much into drinking. Oh. They're quite happy to be fit. They've all gone to their exercise classes. It sounds really interesting.
We're just a bit puzzled, aren't we?
A bit confused.
Yeah, but I mean, look, Have a great time, I think, because you deserve it, absolutely, at the end of your studies. The preliminary finals for AFLW are on today. North Melbourne will play Port Adelaide. Brisbane will play Adelaide in Brisbane tonight. That'll determine who's in next week's grand final and also the location of the grand final as well. Also on today is a big cryptocurrency convention in Sydney. It's called Oz CryptoCon. All one word. All one word.
Yeah, there's a couple of capitals in there somewhere.
Yeah.
It might get a bit of attention just because there's a lot of attention on cryptocurrency at the moment, and that's off the back of the election of Donald Trump. Of course, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, very close. Elon Musk is a big crypto fan. So the thinking is that it could be seen as a more legitimate part of the market when Trump gets into power, that he might make some moves to actually legitimise crypto a bit more. Bitcoin, though, has had a really huge increase in value since Trump's election off the back of that speculation. So it's just one for your news radar.
It feels like might be time to actually engage with what on earth crypto is and what it's doing for me.
We've done a shortcut on crypto.
You have.
I reckon we might need to dust that off, though.
I know that
it's changed a lot.
It's changed a lot, and the fact that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are, the two most powerful people in the world now, and are talking about it, feels like maybe it's time to get across it a bit more. Shout. In Canberra, it's the final sitting week for the year.
Yep, so federal parliament's last hurrah for 2024. We started this week with more than 30 bits of legislation that the Albanese government needed to get through, or wanted to get through at least. They were, some of them, important bits of legislation because they were actually promises from the last election. So if we're heading towards an election early next year, clearing the decks is an important part of that. So we're talking about things like support for housing, changing political donation regimes, also education reforms, and of course the mis and disinformation bill that Andrew and I did a shortcut on this week. Lots coming in the coming week.
Yeah, one bit of legislation that's got a lot of attention and did make progress throughout the last week was the age verification software trial to block under 16s from signing up for social media accounts, something we know a little bit about.
Yeah, we do, because we reckon that it needs to be coupled with education programs when it comes to media literacy before kids get a smartphone in their hands. So that's why we're asking the government to fund our Newshounds program.
Yeah, our view is like a ban, like do whatever you want. I think we've said this before, bans, whatever. Yeah, sure. We're kind of not getting involved in that. The point is that it's probably too late by then. They need to be educated. Kids need to be educated on how to be safe online from primary school age, and arguably even earlier. So
exactly.
That's our little plug for Newshounds again. If anyone's listening, Jason Clare, Jim Chalmers,
Michelle Rowland.
Any of you listening, we still would like that funding to come through. Thank you very much. Kim Williams, he's the chair of the AEBC. He's speaking at the National Press Club.
Yep. And look, he was appointed earlier this year. He's made lots of comments about the performance of the ABC. He's been quite critical about how the national broadcaster has been doing its job. So the ABC, of course, like every news outlet, is really struggling for audience and struggling for engagement. Old platforms like TV and radio are faltering. The national broadcaster actually has a mandate to make sure Australians are informed. So it's probably a speech that'll have a few eyes on it.
Yeah, I reckon I'll watch that one. That's on Wednesday.
Yep.
On Friday, it's our Christmas party, Claire. Important, don't forget. You're actually expected to attend that one. And it's not a Sunday or a Monday, so you're allowed to go out.
I know. Yeah. How cool is that? You're organising the after party. How are you going with that?
Oh, yeah. I just decided there's plenty of pubs open. Right. I don't think I need to specifically
we'll report back on that. I think that's an interesting idea.
No, it'll be fine. Also, I'm pregnant, so I'm not going to have that much fun.
So if we go home after lunch, that's okay.
No, we'll go and have fun. There's 2 Fridays in December before people are off for Christmas as well. Just like a good thing to clock, I think, because December's actually going to feel really short.
Yeah, December's going to be really tight. So I reckon there'll be quite a few workplaces having their Christmas party
next week. Yeah, good point. Squiz recommends. This is a bit delayed. My recommendation this week, if you haven't seen it, the trailer for the upcoming film A Complete Unknown. That's the Bob Dylan biopic. I love a biopic. I really like Bob Dylan.
Okay.
And Timothy Chalamet is the lead. He's getting a lot of attention. People love him.
I can't quite get into Bob Dylan.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why. Because he's like of the era and of such consequence that he's a figure that I'm interested in, but I'm just not kind of...
I reckon there might be songs you love that you don't even realise he wrote.
That's probably right.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm just really excited. It's coming out over the summer. And it's going to be great.
For those who know Kate know that she has had her issues in the past with Timothée Chalamet because he was in the film of her favourite book and he didn't do a great job.
Yeah. Although, no, I mean, I don't, that's just my opinion. I mean, I think people widely disagree with me. I just thought.
But that's okay.
I didn't think he did a bad job. I just thought he
wasn't
casting correctly. Yeah. He's just not what I had in mind after Christian Bale for so long. So, anyway, that's a completely.
It is chalk and cheese, right?
It's chalk and cheese. Side issue and not something that I was happy to talk about publicly. But there we go, because I know it's a very controversial opinion. Speaking of favourites, your favourite book is by Cormac McCarthy. Which one is? Because
All the Pretty Horses.
All the Pretty Horses. But I couldn't actually read this Vanity Fair piece because it was behind a paywall. I must have done too many Vanity Fairs.
Yeah, you'll need to open it up in a different browser then.
Not that we're in the business of telling people how not to pay for news.
Not to pay for news, exactly. Vanity Fair at the end of the week published a piece that has really just sent shockwaves through the literary industry. Of course, Cormac McCarthy is just a world recognised American author, very, very private about his private life, not a lot known about his family or his personal circumstances. However, a woman has come forward to tell her story about a relationship that she had with him over 40-something years. How they met was she was a 16-year-old kid and she then became basically the muse, and they've tracked her influence through 10 of his novels, like really big titles that did very, very well. But lots of questions about that relationship because when they met, he was in his 40s and they did have a sexual relationship. She's okay with it and she actually talks very positively about him. It's a really conflicting, difficult story.
I really want to read it. Yeah.
It's really, really good and it's beautifully written. So it's well worth a read, I think.
All of those links are in your episode notes. They're also always up on our Instagram at The Squiz, so you can find them there as well. Squiz Press, please rate and review this show if you like it. Oh, and also we didn't win another award. Last time we announced that we didn't win an award, people thought that was great. So I'm here to tell you that the Australian Podcast Awards were on last night. We were nominated in the commercial campaign category and we did not win.
Is this where we say it's just nice to be nominated?
It's really nice to be nominated. It's a real shame we didn't win. It was for our Woolies Christmas campaign, which I thought was very worthy, but I think Tony and Ryan beat us out, which is a very big podcast.
Very big podcast.
That's fine, but it's important that you celebrate your wins and you acknowledge your losses.
Well, look, again, I think just to be recognised as a finalist isn't probably a good thing. Also recognised this week on Media Week's top 100 people in media was Kate Watson.
Oh, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. We're not talking about that. Rate and review this show if you like it, please, because rating and reviewing our podcast is a really good way to help other people find it. So that's our ask from you this week. And if you feel sorry for us for not winning that award, it's a nice thing to make us feel better. If you're listening via Apple, you head to the bottom of the show.
Yep.
You tick all the stars.
Yes.
And then you can write something if you want. And if you're listening via Spotify, hit the star at the top of our podcast feed.
Yeah. And look, as we always say, if there's things that you feel like we need to improve, just drop us an email.
Yeah. What is my line?
Don't do it on the review.
Publicly
praise, privately criticise. Yeah, something like that.
Have a great weekend. We'll be back next week.